Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this episode I'm going to be looking at something a little bit different than my usual, taking myself out of my comfort zone and painting something a little bit larger. So we're going to have a look at painting busts, and in this episode we're looking at painting the flesh and the eyes. So we're going to be painting the flesh using temperature underpainting, whereby we're going to map out on the flesh all the hot and the cold zones. By doing it in this way, it'll help us to plan where we're going to add colour, where we're going to put specific tones, and it will just help to give us a good ambience to the piece. So in this example, it's looking at a top-down zenithal where the light is coming from above. So you can see that the light's hitting it from the top end and around the sides, and that the shadows are kind of focused more underneath where the chin and in the eye sockets are. This is a simple way of looking at light, but in my opinion it's a little bit plain for us. We'll look at the next example. In this example, the light is coming from the one side and from above, which is highlighting the whole one side of the face, and as you can see, big build-up of shadows on the other side, underneath the chin and so forth. So now we look at the colours we're going to use for our sketch. So we've split them into cold colours and warm colours. All the names are on the screen. Cold colours are going to go into the shadow areas, whereas our warm colours will be for the light. So now I start to sketch out the warm areas. So for this we're going to use our red, and we're just going to slap it on just in all the areas where the light is hit based upon the sketch that we saw earlier. Always remember that this stage it is just a sketch, so don't worry if you feel that an area is maybe too warm or too cold. You can always go back and start applying some of the other colours just to even it out, and I do so with this one as well. So now I just go in with the emeralds just to map out the cold areas as well. Now this is just how I'm doing it for how I work. It's entirely up to you how you want to apply your colours. If you want to go all the warms first and then all the colds, or vice versa, or flick-flack like I'm doing, it's completely up to you. This stage, it's just all about having fun with colour. Don't be too strict on yourself. Just be nice and loose, slapping it on. If you want to get a build-up of colour, use different layers, multiple layers of the same colour. The more layers you put on, the stronger the tone's going to be. So now we're jumping back onto the warm colours, hitting into our orange red, using this to pick up the areas whereby the light's going to really start to reflect off the surface. So we're looking at the cheekbones, the bridge of the nose, the forehead, etc. So now jumping back over to the cold colours, hitting it with our blue. Again, this is going to work into the deeper shadow areas, focusing this colour on the back end of the sort of kind of cheekbones on the one side, working down underneath the chin and into the right collarbone. Now working into the purple, keeping this underneath the chin and onto the right collarbone. We're focusing this colour more in the bottom third of the head. Hitting back with the warm colours now to balance all the cold colours we've just been doing. Using the yellow to again take the warm colours up a notch in the areas where the light's going to reflect most. And now into the final warm colour, using the ice yellow as the final sort of reflective areas of the skin. This is the last of the warm colours, and it will be most concentrated on the piece. So now I just play around with all the different colours, both warm and cold. Flick-flacking, getting a little bit, so there are some cold colours on the warm side and vice versa, but where they're on the opposite sides, they're going to be most minimal. I just need to note here that I do use dark sea blue into the very deepest shadow areas on the right side of the head. But for some reason I don't have the video footage for this. I don't know where it's gone. And that's it for our temperature sketch. As you can see, it's a nice little roadmap which will plan ahead to how we're going to start layering on all our different skin tones so we can achieve a nice effect on the overall flesh at the end. So now we're going to come in with the airbrush to start our first layer of blending. We're going to use a very light brown for this, just to act as a sort of kind of base foundation for the rest of the skin. Now you can do this with a brush, you can glaze it on and so forth, but it will just take a little bit longer in order to get the same end result. When using the airbrush for this, you want to keep the layer really light. All it is doing is just blend the colours that we already have on the skin, so the colours are going to come through and affect the light brown that we're applying. You don't want to go too heavy, where you're just going to mask out all that work we've done already so far. You can see with the cold colours how it's really darkening that brown a little bit, and it's got all those tones and those nuances, which is going to give a nice dramatic look to the final finished piece. And that's it for our initial blending. As you can see, it's looking really nice already. We're going to take this up now and we're going to start putting some highlights and other shadows and glazes just to finish off the flesh. So taking it over to our wet palette, these are the colours that I've got laid out for our next steps. As you can see in the centre, we've got beige red, and then you've got beige red mixed with 3 of our cold tones above it and 3 of our warm tones below it. So now we're just going to go in with the beige reds, just starting to pick up some of the highlight points, add a little bit of warmth to the base blending layer that we've done. just to start to build up the color on him. Don't forget about applying texture. So for this, you can use stippling, little scratches and so forth, just to get a different sort of mix of tones on the skin as we start to build up all our different colors. As you can see, even with this simple color, it's really starting to build up on the lights on that sketch that we did earlier, and it starts to bring a bit more feeling into our piece. So now moving on to our beige red and yellow mix, we start to lighten the beige red areas that we've done, just to elevate the light and just to increase the contrast. So now using some of our warm mixes, putting them down into a glaze consistency, we're just going to go over some of our warm areas, sort of our warm shadows and so forth, just to add a bit of color and blend out some of the marks that we've already put on there. Also do the same with your cold mixes into your cold areas and into your cold shadows. Like for example, on the inside of the bridge of the nose on the cold side, I'm hitting back with the emerald green mix. And for underneath the jawline and into the side of the neck, hitting with the purple mix, just to bring back that cold purple tone into the lower third of the head. At this stage, I've now added a little bit of pale sand to our yellow and beige red mix, just to brighten it up even further, so we can hit our highlights and just take it up that extra notch. Again, using a little bit of stippling just to apply that variance of texture. Doing this with all the different colors that you've used beforehand will give you a real realistic flesh tone at the end of it. So a little bit of fun, and also as we're dealing with a miniature of a larger scale than your standard 28mm, it gives you more options to play around with added realism. So for this, as Uther is getting a little bit old now, we're going to do some liver spots and some freckling and so forth to his flesh. So for this, we're just going to use brown violet to start with, and just do some light stippling in just certain areas and so forth. Don't go overboard with it, but it's just enough just to add that little bit of extra detail. Now we do the same with chocolate brown, just to add a bit of variance into the coloration of the liver spots. So moving on to painting the hair, as you can see, these are the colours that we're going to use, from PRU blue all the way up to ivory. Starting with the blue, we're just going to put a base layer down on all the hair areas. Now, taking it up to the first highlight, we're going to use the neutral grey, just to start to pick out the hairs and so forth, keeping it more concentrated in areas where the hair is more clumped together and so forth, or areas that's going to be hit by the light. Next, we apply deck tan, again picking up the highlights, working within the areas that we've just done. And finally, we take it up with ivory to the final highlight of the hair. Now, depending on where you apply this highlight, you can get it so you can almost create a nice little natural sheen to the hair, so it reflects the light quite well. And that's it for the hair. So our figure's coming on quite nicely. Now we move on to painting the eyes. Eyes are every miniature painter's nightmare, but don't worry, they seem to be a little bit better on the larger scale miniatures, as we've got more room to move and easier to see. For this, we're going to start to block the eyeball out using ivory. So now we're going to put some colour into our eye. Now for this, I'm going to use khaki grey just to get a nice sort of kind of brown, hazily coloured eye. We're going to use this just to paint in the iris. When putting this colour in, you want to make sure that you don't get any of the ivory above and below the iris showing, so that way then it doesn't look like he's just staring with a insane look on his face. When doing eyes, the key is to try and get them both in the same place amongst the eyeball, so he doesn't have a wonky eye. What I recommend for this is to start off by painting almost like a thin line where you want the center of that iris to be. Double check it, make sure it's correct, and then you can start to build out the shape of the iris from there. So now I lighten the khaki grey with a little bit of ivory just to get a lighter tone, and we paint this inside the iris that we've just done. And now the final, all important, crucial bit, a little bit of black just to dot in the pupil. This is where you may need to sacrifice your chicken to whichever dark painting gods you follow. And that's it. I hope you've all enjoyed this little tutorial. If you liked, please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. And happy painting!